saying you are listening to, you are absolutely listening to the George Espenlaub Show, coming to you live from the Funny Farm. Now, with no further ado, here comes Georgie!
Thank you. Ah, yes. That's what I say. Woo! Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, you're listening to the George Espenlaub Show, coming to you live from the Funny Farm in a place called our world. And whether you're down the street, around the corner, across America, or somewhere around this great big world, we are delighted to have you. So reach out, call somebody, text somebody, however you do it, but tell somebody that the George Espenlaub Show is live right now. We're waiting for our guests to call in, so say a little prayer that nothing has happened. Last time when we had Raleigh Sadler on, the pot was just starting to percolate really, really good, and we had a major technical failure. So let's hope that the technical part on this end is really well, but let's hope that Raleigh, he might have been delayed or for some other reason. Let's hope that Raleigh will call in very shortly. In the meantime, I got this little blue thingy here. In the meantime, while we're waiting for Raleigh to call in, I want you to know that tonight's radio show is being sponsored by Grummy's Custom Flags. That's right, Grummy's Custom Flags. GRUMMY''S Custom Flags. Custom-made wood flags made to order with logo of your choice. Call Travis. His number is 814-207-5489. That number again, 814-207-5489. And when you call, tell him that Espenlaub sent you. He'll know exactly who you're talking about. While we're waiting, let's do this.
Walking home late at night, maybe 2:30. A little drunk, but I'm alright, 'cause I've been hanging with you, and it feels like love. Tell me if I'm wrong, 'cause it feels like love. Yeah, it feels like love. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Don't know what you do, but you make me feel fine. And you can't deny we are not just killing time. You should let me know if you want this true. Baby, you just make me feel crazy. A little crazy for you. Yeah. I think about you and I want you here with me. Am I out of my mind? Or is this how it should be? You made me sing about love. So just tell me if I'm wrong. But it feels like love. Yeah, it feels like love. Yeah! Don't know what you do, but you make me feel fine. And you can't deny we are not just killing time. You should let me know if you want this true. Baby, you just make me feel crazy. A little crazy for you.
train down because our guest has just called in. And let's do it this way. Raleigh, it's so good to have you tonight.
George, it's good to be with you.
We are live, and we are so thankful that you could make it back. And listen, old buddy, I've got my fingers crossed, my eyes crossed, anything that I could cross tonight. Since you was here last time, everything's been working good since we got it fixed. So I just better be quiet, knock on my head, and we'll go from there. How's that?
It sounds great to me, man. Sounds great.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've posted several things today about the show tonight. Excuse me. I can't emphasize enough of how I feel. This is one of the most urgent shows that we have done in all the years that we've been on the air. And I believe that it's relevant for each and every one of us, near, far, and wide. And we have with us in the guest chair tonight Raleigh Sadler out of New York City, who is the founder of Let My People Go. And Raleigh, I imagine that you have had a very busy week thus far.
Yeah, it's been quite a week for sure.
You know, I told the people right after we went on the air, just as we was really getting into it the last time, and the pot was really starting to percolate. And if I forget, you bring it up because I have a tendency to forget some things sometimes. When we lost whatever we lost everything. But when we lost it, and keep this in the back of your mind, you was talking about a lady in church, if that rings a bell or not. And I'll try to remember it. I've got a little note jotted down here if I can remember where all my notes are at. But anyhow, you served in the Christian ministry since 2001. And like we mentioned, you are the founder and the executive director of Let My People Go, headquartered in New York City. You are the author of Vulnerable, Rethinking Human Trafficking, and I'll let you talk about your book and where folks can pick it up at and so on and so forth. And your passion is to see the local church fight global injustices like human trafficking. I guess I need to ask you, how did you get involved in this kind of work? And was there a particular place, a moment, a time when all of a sudden you saw the problem, you realized the problem, and you felt that you needed to get involved?
Yeah, I feel like for years I was kind of blind to the fact that this is happening in plain sight, and I went to a conference called Passion where I was a college minister, and I took a bunch of college students to this conference, and they were highlighting human trafficking. And I'll never forget someone by the name of Christine Kane, who runs an organization called A21. She was up there, she was speaking, and she was talking about how all of us, whether we know it or not, we create a demand for the exploitation of others. The law of supply and demand works in every area, including commercial exploitation. And so when she said that, it hit me, whether I know it or not, I'm creating a demand for human trafficking. And we all are, whether it's what we eat, what we wear, if we consume pornography, what have you, we are ultimately casting a vote and investing in a world that we want. And we're either consuming suffering or we're purchasing freedom. And so when she basically said this, it was like my eyes were opened, and I just remember repenting and saying, God, I'm sorry. I didn't even know that I could be part of this. but I realized that no one is neutral. And I kind of repented, and immediately after, I just felt this gnawing thing, this like, you need to do something, you can do something. And I wrestled with it for about a year, and then sold everything and moved to New York to start a nonprofit to fight human trafficking.
You, on your website, and ladies and gentlemen, please go to LMPG. Let my people go. LMPG. What's the rest of it, Raleigh?
LMPGnetwork.org.
I forgot the network part. Thank you.
Yeah.
Go there, because it is one fantastic website. I spent, I don't know how many hours on there again today, just reading everything that I could absorb. And what I was amazed by, and I mentioned this before, was that little chart. 45 million people globally are caught up in human trafficking. $150 billion. And there's cases reported in all 50 states. Can you explain to us what human trafficking is?
Yeah, simply put, human trafficking is the exploitation of vulnerability for commercial gain. So traffickers, whether they traffic someone for sex, labor, or domestic servitude, they're going to target people who are in the margins, people whose backs are against the wall, people who have few options, if any. And in doing so, they're going to use three tools primarily. They're going to use force, where they say, if you don't do this, I will harm you. They'll use fraud, where they say, hey, this is a great job, or you'll have a place to live, or I love you. Could you do this for me? So they'll use force or fraud, and they can also use coercion. If you don't do this, then I'm going to tell everyone what you did, or I'm going to show everyone this video that we made, or something along those lines. And so human trafficking is ultimately the exploitation of vulnerability for commercial gain, and the means through which people are trafficked is force, fraud, and coercion.
Let me ask you, because as I was reading through your website and things that people said, and I was watching certain videos and things, this human trafficking is more prevalent than most of us are aware of. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely.
It's in every community, or it's everywhere in our country and around the world.
Yeah, human trafficking can happen anywhere because there are vulnerable people everywhere. You're not just going to have human trafficking if you have a highway or a major city or a porous border. Those things can actually possibly increase. Well, no, those things they can play into it, but you're going to have human trafficking anywhere you have vulnerable people.
Two things. What's some of the misconceptions that people have about human trafficking?
Well, I think one of them is that everyone who is trafficked is kidnapped. That can and does happen. But a lot of us, our understanding of human trafficking comes from movies, the Hollywood movies like Taken. And so when we hear human trafficking, we immediately conflate that with sex trafficking. Human trafficking can be for sex, it can be for labor, it can be for domestic servitude, it could be for organ trafficking in certain developing nations. But ultimately, though people can be kidnapped, and that does happen, oftentimes that's not the case. Oftentimes people are groomed. Oftentimes they're exploited or trafficked by someone that they know. It could be a loved one, or it could be a boyfriend or a husband or a maternal figure. It's not always this kind of stranger danger scenario at play. Another myth is that people are immediately drugged and chained to like a radiator or to a bed. Again, this can and does happen, but the majority of the time, the chains are psychological, they're emotional. There's this idea of trauma bonding. It's kind of like what we have with Stockholm syndrome. You know, the person experiences a traumatic event with their exploiter, and there's a bond formed.
No, go ahead. No,
and so those are two prevalent myths, and then another myth is just it doesn't happen in my community. It only happens in developing nations, and that's wrong because, like I said, you know, if there are vulnerable people in your community, there's someone with a little bit more power. Doesn't have to be much, but with a little bit more power and leverage that could exploit them.
So it could be happening near us, around us, and we're not aware of it, or we can't see it. I don't know exactly what the term would be, but it could be happening near and around us, and for the most part, and it's sad, but we're oblivious to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like oftentimes we don't see it because we're not looking for it.
So it's like I say so often on this radio show, we hear things every single day, but we don't always listen. So we see things, but we don't really see things, if that makes any sense at all. Why, Raleigh, do you think that we are, is it the fact that we have some kind of denial syndrome, or is it that we just don't want to be involved, or what do you think some of the reasons are?
I mean, it could be a myriad of things, you know, like maybe there is a denial. Maybe we don't want to assume that these negative things are happening in our communities. Maybe we're afraid. Maybe we're afraid of what cost it would cost us if we actually believed that this was happening in our community. But oftentimes I've found that just a lot of people, they just don't know, you know. It's just like, it's not like they're even trying to run from helping someone. They're like, oh, well, I had no idea that this was happening here. And yeah, I think oftentimes we put labels on things, and we think, well, if we see someone who is on the street and they're being sold, we say, oh, well, that person chose a life of prostitution. Well, we don't know that. You know, there are statistics that say that chances are that that person didn't choose that lifestyle. You know, there could have been force, fraud, and coercion. Or, you know, it's just, we see that person who's working in the back of the house in a restaurant and they have questionable documentation, and we think, oh, well, they just came here and they got that job. But we don't know if there was a middleman that is actually exploiting them. You know, we have to peel back these labels and actually listen to people's stories so that we can get really what's happening.
In reading through the website and going through these questions that I printed off, I was amazed, somewhat startled, when it talked about the people that are vulnerable people take advantage of that. But yet we ourselves are vulnerable, and we don't want to admit it. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, I think for us, if we're going to fight human trafficking by caring for those people who are most vulnerable, we have to understand that we're also vulnerable as well. And a quick way to find out if you're vulnerable is by caring for other people who are in need. Because as you care for them, their need will ultimately expose your need. And each of us, I think, is a wounded healer. You know, each of us has this thing that we've experienced that kind of drives us to care for people who are experiencing something similar. And for me, as a person of faith, I would look at this and say, you know, because Jesus Christ was wounded for us, for our transgressions, we're motivated to care for other people who are hurting and in need. And I think ultimately, unless we recognize that we are vulnerable and that we also struggle, unless we recognize that, then we will accidentally position ourselves above the person we're trying to help. We will come with a posture of arrogance unless we see that we're not better than them. We're actually on the same level. We may have different situations in our lives, but we are just as human as the person we're trying to help. And I think that's very key in caring for someone who's going through a hard time.
Is that kind of a telltale sign when we act condescending above those people that need help? Is that kind of a telltale sign of our own vulnerability that we don't want to face?
Yeah, I would say so. I had a friend who works for another anti-trafficking nonprofit, and she read my book, and she shared that really opened her eyes, because she'd been into work for so long that she really had started to feel like just that she was different. And by reading this book, she realized she was made of the same stuff as the people she was trying to help. And it completely revolutionized the way that she was caring for vulnerable people. And for me, that was so wonderful to hear, because I think this is a simple concept, but it's a hard one to grasp sometimes, because it may not come naturally. And that's why through scripture, we are reminded that a king comes supernaturally. And that is often a positive thing, to ultimately rest in God to the point where we realize we're not the hero, but he is.
So true. Where can people get your book at, Raleigh?
Right now, you can get it on Amazon. It's available in Kindle format and hard copy, and they're running a great deal on it. So you can go to Amazon.com and type in Vulnerable Rethinking Human Trafficking, and it'll come right up.
On your website, when I was looking at that chart of 45 million worldwide, there was a statement on there, and I wrote it down, that said, many in the anti-trafficking movement say the local church is one of the few places where victims can feel safe from their exploiters. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So I've heard of many stories where those who have been victimized can go to church without the presence of their exploiter. And I've heard statistics, or where I've heard people share where, you could go into the ER as well as churches. One of my friends, you asked me to tell this story earlier, a friend of mine who basically her testimony to me kind of changed the way that Let My People Go would go. Like at first, when Let My People Go was starting, I wanted it to be kind of an awareness organization. And after this conversation, I realized I wanted it to train churches to better care for vulnerable people. But my friend, she was telling me how she had been trafficked by a boyfriend into pornography. And I asked her, I said, while you were being trafficked, what did the local church do? And she laughed at me. She said, for 5 years, I was trafficked and no one noticed. She's like, I didn't notice, because oftentimes those who are victimized don't self-identify. They think they're in a bad relationship or a bad job. You know, it's like there is trauma bonding, like I said earlier, happening. But she said no one noticed, no one did anything. And I've had a lot of friends who were in churches that if someone did notice, there was shame or there was re-exploitation or things like that. And so for Let My People Go, we're trying to go in and say, church, what would it look like if you knew how to identify and respond to vulnerability? If we could inject justice and mercy into your DNA so that you could better care for your vulnerable neighbor, how would that change your church? How would that change your community?
Oh, that's quite interesting. There's a million thoughts going through my head right now. When you first went to New York to start Let My People Go, did you have any support, any backing, or was you kind of like Davy Wilkerson years and years ago, who went in and started ministering to the gangs? Did you have any support? Was there someone behind you?
Not specifically. I started raising support with the team. I started as an individual missionary. Just started going to friends and family and asking them to pray and to give. But there was no official, like, denominational support per se. There was an agency that was allowing me to raise support through them, but yeah, I just kind of like went. I just kind of went and I served at a church, and then I raised support to start this anti-trafficking thing. And yeah, some people came alongside of me during that time, but yeah, I just kind of showed up in New York and really prayed that I was doing the right thing.
So it was like Davy Wilkerson when he went in to minister to the gangs and ended up starting Teen Challenge. I have a question for you from one of our people in the chat room, Paula from South Dakota. She asked, my daughter and her two friends that are listening with me would like to know if this book would be okay for them to read.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this book, it's coming to you from a kind of a Christian perspective, and it's going to challenge you, and especially with regards to vulnerability, but it's written from a perspective that I think it'd be good for anyone to read of any age, really.
Do you have, I mean, I assume that you do now. You have facilities there in New York City. You're not far from Hell's Kitchen, right?
No, not far at all.
So you have facilities where people can come and be ministered to, or how's that work?
Well, Let My People Go doesn't, since we work specifically with the local church, but there are organizations that have facilities, say in Hell's Kitchen and different places around the city, like aftercare homes and things like that, things of that nature, where people can go and be safe. And so those exist. We do not run them specifically as an organization because that's not necessarily our role. But yeah, they do exist.
I got you. This same lady said they are doing a whole presentation at church and school on human trafficking. Isn't that ironic? That's pretty cool. So yeah, Yeah, Raleigh's book would be great to read. And besides, it can educate you and open your eyes and so on and so forth. So good job, girls. A whole presentation at church and school on human trafficking. Raleigh, what's some of the things that you encountered as an individual going into New York City from the very beginning? What's some of the difficulties that you faced? And I gather there was quite a few of them, but what was a couple of them?
I mean, I think fundraising is hard. I think fundraising is pretty tricky, but it's something that we have to do. I think also coming to New York to start this, there was because I was going from being a college pastor to starting a nonprofit, and yeah, there was just a lot of people who I think meant really well, but they just basically didn't exactly think that I was doing the right thing, and they told me that. Many people told me that, and then I just kept going, and then even when I was doing it and I was saying, hey, this is how we're fighting human trafficking through vulnerability, people were like, no, that's wrong. That's not how you fight human trafficking. And I mean, so many people. And now it's like, I mean, we were ahead of the curve, and now vulnerability is being really focused on, and it wasn't being focused on 7 years ago, not like this, not like it is now. And so it's just really exciting to see how things have shifted, and how, like, it was for such a time as this moment that I came into the city, and there were great people who were running nonprofits who kind of came alongside of me and raised me up and taught me. And like, I kind of worked with them and collaborated with great people who I learned a lot from, especially early on. And so, yeah, I think there were very hard times when I was starting this out, very hard times, but you know, there was always a way. There was always someone there to kind of help me and guide me as I processed through the difficulties.
When you were saying there were people that said, no, you shouldn't do that, and this and that, I'm sure that we can all relate to that with someone and sometime in our life telling us, no, you shouldn't do that. No, that's not right. No, you know, it's amazing how so many people knows what we shouldn't do. But just because you said yes to God when He laid this on your heart, the results, the things that are happening is amazing, and people are coming out of darkness into the light. Let me ask you this, because I think this is somewhere where we were last time. What is a church reaction when you approach them with this subject and say, this is what real Christianity is? You know, we all hear it. It's a spiritual warfare. We don't fight against flesh and blood. We fight against principalities and powers, and on and on and on. Put on the whole breastplate of God. We put on the armor of God. But yet when it comes time to saddle up, move out, and we're going to strike, all of a sudden you look around and the troops aren't there. So when you approach a church with this message, what are some of the reactions that you get?
Well, you know, it depends on the church, but sometimes people will say, well, we're already doing this. And I'll ask them, well, what are you doing? And they'll say, well, we have a program and we're meeting this need. And typically that's great. But where I push back is I say, well, is the whole church prepared to care for their vulnerable neighbor? And the answer is almost always no. sometimes people say, well, this shouldn't be what we do. We shouldn't have to do this because this is something the police do. I was speaking at a pastor's event once. It was a small pastor's event here in New York City. And as I was speaking, I was questioned by a pastor, and he said, this is not what we're supposed to do. This is law enforcement. The church should not be addressing human trafficking in any facet. And he tried to yell at me from the floor, and it got a little intense, because for me, I see this as, yes, the church should be doing something. And how do we do something that is in line and aligned with what the scriptures dictate? What does that look like for the church? How can we be a safe place? Because if anything, we're realizing right now that churches aren't necessarily safe for vulnerable people, and we advertise them as safe havens. We advertise them as sanctuaries. We even call our buildings sanctuaries, and it's just like, how can you be a sanctuary if you're not safe? And so, yeah, we come across that as well, of, well, we shouldn't be doing this. And then some people, they just don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. And so with that last group, we're able to actually say, okay, we can show you, walk with us. We will train you. We will help you assess the needs in your community. We'll help you build a team that can spearhead the efforts of justice and mercy in your church. We'll help your pastoral team speak on these issues in a way that's wise, caring, and dignifying. We'll help your small groups work with vulnerable people in the church and in the outer community. That is our goal. And so, yeah, I feel like I've seen all three of those groups.
I would, I'm quite certain that there was there has been, and will continue to be, some ruffled feathers, along the pathway, because, Jesus said, you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. And sometimes that truth stuff really smacks you upside your head, and it kind of makes you a little upset, ruffles your feathers. But yet, on the whole, and the man is in the chat room tonight. He was my guest on Wednesday night. He said it like this. I'll paraphrase what he said. Too many Christians keep their faith, their salvation, private, where they don't want to let people know. That is totally against what Christ taught, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think our faith ultimately works itself out. And people, if we truly believe something, it should not only impact our intellect, but it should impact our actions. Mm-hmm.
My dad always told me, not only once, but several times, because I was a little thick-headed, he used to tell me, and when he'd get a little upset with me, he always called me boy. He'd say, boy, don't tell me what you're going to do. Just do it. Because your actions speak louder than words. And all through my life, I didn't always pay attention to that at those particular times. But all through my life, I've heard that over and over again in my head. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Your actions will speak louder than words. And Christianity, we sing that song, Onward, Christian Soldiers, and that's all well and good, and it sounds good, and it makes you feel good. But what about the battle? What about, really picking up your gear and marching forth to the battlefield? Sure, it's law enforcement's problem, Sure, it's a government problem. Sure, it's everybody's problem. But sure, the church, and we say the church, there is no stronger force than the church. Well, then let's get on with it and let's do what we have to do. Is there a fear when you approach some people with this whole thing?
I don't know. I mean, like a fear on my side or a fear on their side?
Fear on their side. I don't want to come out of my little cocoon.
Yeah, I think we all at some level are trying to protect ourselves and those we care about. And sometimes our desire for self-protection can cause us to not protect the people who are ultimately vulnerable in our communities, and we can actually find ourselves villainizing them, Mm-hmm. And so we will view them through a political lens, we'll view them through whatever kind of lens, but we'll say, that person is bad, they need to stay out here. We are good, we need to stay in here. And I think the gospel just shatters those lenses and basically says, while you were yet sinners, Christ died for you. I mean, you couldn't even get right. You were broken, and Christ came and made you whole. And so because he's done that, now you're free to love people who don't share your same background, people who haven't had the opportunities that you've had, people who may disagree with you politically, but you're able to care for people who could ultimately be targeted by exploiters, and I think when we realize that God protects us, we're free to protect others.
Mm-hmm. Have you found in your ministry people that were, let me use the word rescued, people that were rescued have, once they found Christ and they realized that they're worthy, they're worth something, were there people that went on to accomplish some really good things?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my friends who's now actually an advisor for Let My People Go, she was trafficked for, I believe, 3 years, and then her trafficker was jailed on an unrelated charge. She got away from him. She started going to church. She became a believer, and she's recently graduated with a degree in social work, and she's working with other people who've been exploited. And it's just been amazing just to see her joy and the love that she carries as she cares for other people. And yeah, I've seen a lot of people like that. Mm-hmm.
That is redemption. That is redemption highlighted and seen in the highest degree, as far as I'm concerned. Look how many people, look how many men and women throughout Scripture were miserable, were this. They committed murder, they committed this, they committed that. But yet God, in his mercy, brought forth redemption, and they went on to do great things. Not that they would be seen or heard, but that God would be lifted up and all the glory would be bestowed to him. So it's just an age-old redemption story that good things happen when Christians mount up and begin to do what we've been commanded to do. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What have you found to be the most sustaining in this work? Things that have kept you.
I think having a self-care plan, like having an understanding of your natural rhythms, is very helpful. I think sometimes we can get engaged in the needs of other people. We don't really know our own needs, but having people around you where, like, if you're caring for vulnerable people, you should probably get counseling and have someone work with you through your own vulnerabilities, because we all have them. You should probably think through, okay, when are the times where I actually start burning out? And how can I rest before that to kind of be proactive? How can I have a preemptive rest plan? How can I have rhythms of not only rest, but relationships? Like, have other people in my life, have community in my life. How can I have rhythms of religious observance where I'm not only just physically resting, but I'm also resting spiritually in who Jesus is for me. I'm worshiping. Like, I think these rhythms are very important, and oftentimes we don't think in rhythms. Mm-hmm. But if we really think about it, what was the first thing Adam and Eve did after they were created? They rested with God, like they worked from rest, not for it. And I think that's something that we really have to think through. And also just to know that Jesus probably didn't have a 50-week work schedule with 2 weeks off. He definitely had these religious observances where he had friends and family, and they all kind of worshiped together. He had his rhythms of rest, he had his rhythms of relationship, and he had his rhythms of religious observance all in one. And I think he was consistently getting away. And I think this is something that if we're going to work with vulnerable people, we need to realize that we're not the hero, that God is. The job's already taken. So how can we just follow rather than solely lead? How can we follow him and realize it's okay to take a day off? It's okay to take a week off. It's okay to care for yourself. Because if you burn out, who are you going to care for? If your ministry dies, you're going to end up hurting the people you're trying to help. So why not go slower? Why not care for yourself as you do it?
That is very, very good advice, my brother. Very good advice. I was sitting here listening to you, and I was examining my own life, and I was thinking, listen to what this man's telling you here.
Well, I've learned it the hard way, man. Definitely the hard way, and I've been like approached by very dear friends who said, "Hey, we love what you're doing, but we want to see you do this for 20 years and not 2 years." Uh-huh. And that was hard. That was hard to hear, but it was what I needed to hear, and I was able to kind of reacclimate.
In this whole ball of wax, and I guess this just goes along with what you were just saying. You've seen heartache, pain, you face pain, tragedies, horror. And so you've seen that. And if we're not careful, just like you said, that could become overwhelming, that it could just take you down, put you down, and keep you down. Is that not right?
Right. Yeah, it can be overwhelming for sure. It can wear you out.
I just told a young fella not too long ago, just started in the ministry, and I said, listen to me. I said, because, a young fellow going into the ministry, and he's excited, and he's zealous, and he wants to preach the word, and so on and so forth, and that's tremendous. But I said, you have to take time to stop and just worship for your own good. I said, we can't drive our vehicles all week long or 2 weeks without putting gas in them. We've got to go to the service station. We got to put gas in it. Much as we don't like it, but we've got to put gas in it, or we're not going nowhere. I said, more so with us, where we have to just stop and worship and refill our tanks, and that just coincides with what you was saying. Raleigh, what can we do? You're there in New York City. I'm here in Laurel, Delaware. This lady is out in South Dakota. Another person's in Pennsylvania, and so on and so forth. What can we do as we listen to you challenge us? What can we do about this?
So I think one thing we can do is we can ultimately look up and realize, like, what is actually happening. You know, how do we find out what human trafficking looks like in our community? And I think one way to do that is to set a Google alert to go, and if you don't know what that is, you can Google it. But basically, you're setting an alert where you're saying, you're putting in the search query, human trafficking plus your town or your city, and you're going to get every article about human trafficking in your community. And so as you read those on a daily basis, you're going to become an expert about what's happening in your community as well as your region. This is very helpful. This is a great way to do it. Another thing is to read books. You know, you can start with Vulnerable, but there's also other great books that were written by just amazing people, like anything Corbin Addison has written, he writes fictional accounts of human trafficking, but he wrote a great book called A Walk Across the Sun, or a guy named Ben Skinner, who wrote a book called A Crime So Monstrous, where he talks about human trafficking around the world. Reading good books can give you a good picture. Or Rachel Lloyd, who wrote the book Girls Like Us, who runs a nonprofit called Girls Education and Mentoring Services. I mean, read the books. Go to the PolarisProject.org and learn the signs of human trafficking. Learn what the red flags are. You can put the human trafficking hotline number in your phone right now, which is 1-888-3737-888. It's 1-888-3737-888. So if you see something, you're able to call them and say, hey, I saw this. What do I do? Those are just a few things that come to mind.
Give us that phone number again, and then give us that Google search again.
Yeah, it's 1-888-3737-888.
1-888-37-888.
Yeah, 1-888-3737-888.
3737. Okay. I got you. 888. And that is the human trafficking hotline.
Right.
Okay.
And then the Google alert is basically, you just type in, you just search Google alert, and it'll basically send you an email a day with whatever you put in the search query. So if you put human trafficking plus Cleveland, every article about human trafficking in Cleveland, it's going to come to you. Or if you put human trafficking in Florida or human trafficking in the Southeast, or, you know, that kind of thing, you're going to get everything that comes out. And that's going to help you really learn about what's going on. You can put just human trafficking, but you're going to get all sorts of articles from around the world anytime, because basically the Google alert is constantly searching for that criteria. So it's basically doing the searching when you're not there. And so once it finds it, it's going to give it to you.
I can see where that's going to open up our eyes when we really pinpoint that search, like here in our area, and all of a sudden, wow, and the light comes on. That's fantastic. And with that hotline, Paula, that's the lady that's in South Dakota. I will PM you Raleigh's website. In fact, I'll mention it again. It is, give it to me, Raleigh.
It's lmpgnetwork.org, like LMPG, like Let My People Go, network.org.
All right, and I will PM you that, Paula, and I will put it up on our page also. The phone number and the Google search thing. Wow. Off the top of your head, and I'm sure that you're reaching out across America, are you not, for partners, churches, so on and so forth?
Oh yeah, definitely across the country for sure.
What is the way that we could be of help? Say a church around the corner hears this, does this Google search, and so on and so forth. What is the way that they can contact you?
You can contact us through our website, and we would be glad to work with your church and help your church better care for vulnerable populations, because that's really why we're here. We love making people aware, but ultimately we want to see churches become safe places for vulnerable people. We want to see people who are isolated come into a church and find community. You know, we want to see that. And so yeah, you can contact us through our website.
lmpgnetwork.org.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
Does it matter if the community is small or in our area we have small communities, towns. There's probably, I don't know if there's 3,000 people that lives in our community. But does it matter the size of the community?
Not really. No. I mean, you're still going to have exploitation regardless of how big your community is.
Right. We'll put this word out to as many churches as we can get it to.
Thank you, George.
My goodness gracious. I've got a friend in Pittsburgh that I'm going to send all this information to. And with your permission, I'll tell him to contact Alex. He is a native. He's grown up, educated, in the whole 9 yards. He's been in Pittsburgh forever. He knows people, places, and things. So I'm going to put him in touch, hopefully with Alex, because he knows a lot of people in Pittsburgh. Perhaps you've already got something going there. He could hook up with them.
No, that'd be great.
My goodness. It's such a vast subject, and it is evil. That's the only thing I can say. And the only thing that can combat evil is the power of God through his people. I am a firm believer of that. Raleigh, I thank you, my brother. Let's stay in touch. I'll do as much as I can with this information that I have. And
Thank you, George.
If I need more information, I'm going back to that website, because that is one, and this is an Espenlaub word, that is one fantabulous website. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll put it back up on our radio post page. We'll PM it out. You folks that are in the chat room, help me out with this. You people that are listening, help us out with this, and let's get involved. And above all, I would encourage each and every one of us to put Raleigh and his whole organization on our prayer list and uphold him in prayer. That is so very, very important. Raleigh, let's stay in touch, my brother.
Sounds great.
And I thank you for coming on, and hey, no technical difficulties.
Yeah, I know, right? This is great.
I thank you so much, Raleigh. Give Alex my best, You've been a great help to me.
I will.
And God bless you. And we'll talk at you later.
Talk to you later.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that subject is just it's mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling, to say the least. That's right, Paula. The only way to break the silence is to get involved. Paula said, thank you. These girls have pages of notes, the website, hotline number, Google search. This has really caught their eye and ears. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends, Romans, and countrymen, remember, if you know someone that missed the show tonight, tell them no problem. You can go back and you can listen to it over and over and over again. Just go to Spreaker.com or go on our Facebook page, the George Espenlaub Show page. You can bang it off of there, iHeartRadio, Spotify. We're on the VIP network. We're out there so far that I don't even know where we are half the time. You could even go on the Espenblog. That's the Espenblog, TheEspenblog, the Espenblog.com, and you can listen to the show right there while you're scrolling all through the blog. We have done a tremendous amount of work on the blog. It's all fixed up, fired up, and it's all ready to be read. And we're going to be putting a lot of posts up there from now on pertaining to this, that, those, and these. But I want you to understand that for you that are listening tonight and for you that are listening later, wherever you might be, this was one of the most urgent radio shows that I've ever done in my life. And that's been quite a few. I can't emphasize the importance of it. It's all around us. And we just can't close our eyes to it. We just can't pretend it's not there because it really, really is. So let's mount up. Let's push this. Let's get involved. Let's do something. One man used to tell me, and it's not necessarily in this case, but he used to tell me, let's do something even if it's wrong. Well, and sometimes we would do exactly that. But in this case, let's do something because it's right. And we can help and minister to other people. My goodness gracious, time has flown by. That man could talk to us and educate us all night long, and we still wouldn't even done it. But I thank him. Raleigh Sadler out in New York City, Let My People Go, wrote the book Vulnerable, Rethinking Human Trafficking. Wow. I hope that it was as good for you as it was for me tonight because, boy, that gets down deep in the marrow of your soul, and that's where we need to be challenged in this day and age. To all my friends out there, near, far, and wide. Hey, I was looking at some statistics. Espenlaub can't speak right sometimes. I was looking at some statistics. About 18% of our listeners come from Paris, France. Listen in Paris, France. I thought that was pretty cool. Of course, we got them listening in Germany, the UK, Indonesia, Canada, all throughout Europe, so and all across America. And we're just so happy that each and every one of you takes the time to tune in or listens later. My oh my. Hey, you can download the show. You can download as many copies as you want. It don't cost you a nickel. Go ahead and do that. Tell people. Just download it, take it, give it out, pass it on. Whatever you do with it, it's entirely up to you. See my good friend Stan's here. My wife, Paula. Everybody else. From all of us here at the Funny Farm, Charlie, Dorothy the opera singer, Harvey, Miss Ernestine, Travis, and all the gang. Monday night we'll have Mr. Ed Temple here, who has written the book School Choice. Oh boy, that's a good one. That's a good one. Ed was with us about a month ago. He's coming back. A lot of things have happened in his life. A lot of progress with the book, so on and so forth. So, Escape from Uncle Sam's Plantation is the name of his book. So, tune in Monday night. Now, if it's nighttime where you're at, have a good night. If it's already daytime, you have a great day. But everyone, enjoy the weekend. Get you some rest. And listen, everybody. Behave yourself out there. And please don't drink and drive. Got that? All right, everybody. Love you to pieces. Love you to death. I just pray God keeps us all in the center of his hand. Till Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. This is George Espenlaub saying good night, everybody. Stay safe.